Hi everyone. I don't know about you, but I hate it when preachers miss out the difficult parts of the passage. But on Sunday I missed out part of Mark's Gospel because I wasn't sure how to explain it. So I've done a bit of thinking, and I hope this video will help to fill the gap for you. And the question that I want to answer is, why does Jesus spit? Why does Jesus spit? In Mark chapters 7 and 8, Jesus performs two healing miracles, the opening of the ears of a deaf man and the eyes of a blind man. And in both these miracles, there's something strange. Jesus spits and applies saliva to the person that he's healing. And that is a unique thing. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the Gospels apart from these two accounts. There's one similar thing in John chapter 9 where Jesus makes mud by spitting on the ground and puts the mud on someone's eyes to heal them of blindness. But these are the only two that are like this, and they both come together in Mark's Gospel. So why does Jesus do it that way? Well, if you look on the internet, you read some books, you'll see some suggestions for why. But I think that all of those suggestions are a bit unsatisfactory. So one suggestion is that saliva was seen as having kind of magical powers to heal. I think if people did see it that way, then Jesus would avoid it at all costs, wouldn't he? In case people trusted in magic rather than in him. Another suggestion is that saliva was known to be good for healing. But there's no evidence actually that people did understand that you could use saliva for that in those days. If they did, they certainly didn't expect it to be able to heal blindness or deafness. And again, like the first suggestion, I think Jesus would avoid it if that was the expectation. He wanted people to trust in him, not in some healing power of something else. The third suggestion is that saliva was an unclean thing. And so Jesus uses something unclean to show that he can bring cleansing even through the unclean. Now that's an interesting idea, but the problem with that is that there's no evidence that saliva was seen as an unclean thing. The law in the Old Testament doesn't say that saliva from a clean person makes somebody else unclean. So is there a better explanation? Well, I think there is. I'm going to give you my best thoughts about it, and you can see what you think. Jesus, of course, could have healed without doing this. He heals, for example, in Mark chapter 10, a blind man just by speaking to him without touching him or doing anything to him. This is a deliberate choice that Jesus makes at this point. So let's see if we can work out why. In this section of Mark's Gospel, chapter 7 and 8, there are lots of echoes of of God's work in the Old Testament as he led his people out of slavery in the Exodus and through the wilderness. So in Mark chapter 8 and the first 10 verses, Jesus provides bread from heaven to feed a great crowd in the desert, in the wilderness. He's doing what God did for the Israelites in the Old Testament. Jesus is repeating that to show that he is the Lord their God. But the disciples fail to understand that. They don't see the lesson that the bread is teaching them. So in Mark chapter 8, verse 17, Jesus says, "Do you still not see or understand? Do you have eyes but fail to see and ears but fail to hear?" The disciples' problem is that they are blind and deaf spiritually. Now actually that's the very same criticism that Jesus makes of the Israelites in the desert. So back in Deuteronomy 29, the Lord says this, "To this day the Lord has not given you a mind that understands, or eyes that see, or ears that hear. Yet the Lord says, during the 40 years that I led you through the wilderness, you ate no bread." That is, God provided manna from heaven so they didn't have to eat normal bread. "I did this so that you might know that I am the Lord your God." And so there's a connection, isn't there, between what happened in the Old Testament, in the Exodus, and here in Mark. We have the same thing going on. God provides bread from heaven for his people, but they still don't see or hear or understand who he is, that he is the Lord their God. And on either side of that provision of bread, in Mark's Gospel, we have one of these two healing miracles. Jesus opens the ears of the deaf and the eyes of the blind. They're illustrations of what the disciples need. They are spiritually blind and deaf. They need Jesus to open their eyes and their ears and understand that he is God. And I think this is where the spitting comes in. I think it is to reinforce that point, to show us another connection between what happened in the Old Testament and what Jesus is doing here. So in Deuteronomy chapter 8, Jesus says this about the people in the wilderness. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years. He humbled you, causing you to hunger, and then feeding you with manna to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. And actually, although it's translated every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord, literally it is everything that comes from the mouth of the Lord. What people need for life, true life, is not just bread that God provides. They need what comes from God's mouth. And in Mark chapter 7 and 8, Jesus has produced bread for the people, but what they need is the thing that comes from Jesus' mouth. They need the saliva, which is a sign of opening spiritual eyes and ears, giving understanding. What comes from Jesus' mouth in Mark's Gospel, 7 and 8, is the means of spiritual understanding. That is what people need. And so using the saliva reinforces this message that the disciples and all of us, what we need for life is not bread alone. We need to see and understand who Jesus is. Well, I don't know if you find that convincing. I hope it will be a help to you. I hope maybe it will encourage you to think through some of these difficult parts of the Bible. And if you've got questions or suggestions or improvements, then do let me know.